Howdy, folks, and welcome to December's. Yeah, it is December, isn't it? Yes, it is. Okay. Oh, you wouldn't believe I do this for a living. Welcome to December's Saltmine Discord Q&A session. For those of you who are watching this on Monday as Mingles with Jingles, welcome to Mingles with Jingles. Hope you all had a great weekend. Now forget it, because it's Monday. No announcements or anything to make, so I think I'm just going to crack on straight away with your questions. And yeah, nice. I'm not going to actually miss the first ones this time. So, oh my God, I've just seen the name of the first person. I believe he's from Poland. We're just going to call him Dave. He's named himself after that impossible to pronounce Gregor Bryszkiewicz, or whatever his name was, that World of Warships Polish captain. Happy morning to you, Jingles. Don't worry, I'm checking, by the way. Yes, we are recording. We'll make a poll out of you yet. It's almost like you knew. Soon you'll be cooking vodka and drinking pierogies like the rest of us. Anyways, on to the question. As I'm a fairly young miner myself, I was wondering if you had a piece of life advice to give out to those of us starting out in the world. I'm sure there's heaps of wisdom that comes with being an old gnome overlord that some of us younger disciples might find useful. That's all for me. Back to the mines I go. Actually, yeah. This was something I was thinking of just yesterday. Because I'm sure, like I used to be, many of you are, how can I put this? There are a certain type of people in the world, and I suspect it probably accounts for most of us, who are too lazy to do everything the easy way. What I mean by that, just as an example, I'll give you a couple of examples, like Eddie, for example, my friend Eddie. He is definitely one of those people, and I used to be as well, who were just too lazy to do everything the easy way. So, for example, there's a slight blockage in the sink in the kitchen. And instead of fixing it there and then, or hiring somebody to fix it there and then, he'll just let it go. Or he'll do the bare minimum required to get that blockage cleared immediately. And over time, eventually, because he was just too lazy to get everything done the easy way by getting it done properly, it snowballs into a problem that he ends up having to pay somebody 150 quid to fix. Another example, slightly more relevant. The intro to my World of Tanks videos. The sound in it is at a slightly higher recording level, as anybody who's listened to one of my World of Tanks videos on headphones in the last couple of years, where I've forgotten to adjust the audio level of that intro. The sound level is way higher than the rest of the video. So headphone users get their ears blasted off if I forget to adjust the audio level in the World of Tanks intro. Which means that every time I'm doing a World of Tanks video, I have to drop the audio level of that intro down so that it doesn't blow the ears off all the headphone users. And sometimes I forget to do it. Because I was too lazy to re-record the intro, which would take like 30 seconds, with a lower volume level, so I don't have to do that every single time I do a World of Tanks video. And just a couple of weeks ago it occurred to me, why don't I just do it? So I did it, and the problem went away. You know, it's less work for me to do. And I used to be like that all the time. You know, there's some laundry on the floor. Yeah, fine, I'll pick it up later. No. If you see something that needs doing, this is the rule. This is the rule that I try to live by now and have for the last couple of years. Because it makes life so much easier. If you see something that needs doing, like a dish that needs to be washed, or a piece of laundry that needs to be picked up, or some rubbish on the floor that needs to be put into the bin, and if that thing will take you less than 1 minute to do it now. Don't let it lie around. Don't let it wait for later. Do it now. If there's something that you need to do and it takes you a minute or less to get it done, do it. Don't let it wait. And seriously, you wouldn't believe how much easier it just makes your life. Anyway, nice question. Good one to start off with. Completely random. Nothing whatsoever to do with games. Next question from Basement Jesus. We seem to see a question from Basement Jesus every time we have these. Nice to see you back. Dear Gnome Overlord, what is your opinion of the world's one true king, Godzilla, and have you watched any of his films? Ooh, I'm going to have some controversial opinions here. I think Godzilla's amazing. I used to watch all of those old Japanese Godzilla movies dubbed into English when I was a kid. I actually quite liked the Roland Emmerich Godzilla movie from 1993. I acknowledge that it wasn't a particularly good film. I'm not trying to say it's a great movie, but I kind of liked it. because it was kind of like, I don't know if you remember all of those old monster movies and science fiction movies from America in the 50s and 60s, where the hero was always the scientist. You know, the scientist was the guy who figured everything out, and he had a sidekick who was usually an army officer or something who did all of the heavy lifting and the punching for him, but it was the scientist who was the hero. And Roland Emmerich's Godzilla movie was like that. The more recent Godzilla movies I've not been such a big fan of, because that's not the case in those movies, and also they're incredibly stupid. And also I can't remember the first, the new Godzilla movies. They've done a couple of them now, but I remember in the first one, I think Godzilla was only actually in it for 4 or 5 minutes. The whole movie, this is. I appreciate that sometimes, like in the original Alien, for example, they didn't overdo showing you the alien. They let your fear of what it might be build up, and then they would show it to you suddenly, like, oh. But they showed it to you enough that you realised you were watching a movie about an alien. In that first of the new Godzilla movies, they teased it too much and didn't show it to you enough. And I wasn't a huge fan. And then you have fantastic actors in it. I mean, like really, really good actors, like Bryan Cranston and Ken Watanabe. And Ken Watanabe basically was only in that movie for about 4 minutes, and all he ever did was say, Godzilla! And then they killed Bryan Cranston off in the first half hour. And the only people left in the movie were these non-entities that you'd never heard of and you've never seen since. So, yeah, not been a huge fan of the recent Godzilla movies, but as a character, I think Godzilla's amazing. Next question from LX12. I remember in the past Q&A, you asked the Saltmine Discord servers to find and suggest various types of potential co-op games that you might like to try. I did indeed. So I want to know what co-op games you plan on playing next year. Well, Dark Tide's out, so I've been doing that. Most of the people I know have been absolutely kicking the arse out of Dark Tide, and it is a great game. But he was also going to suggest the game Deep Rock Galactic. He says it's a lovely Danish co-op game where you and your friends play as a couple of dwarven miners in space with a great alcohol issue, mining gold in the salt pits of moon hoxers, killing bugs, and so on and so on. I gave it a try, and I don't know what it was about it. I'm not saying it's a bad game. It's not. It's a good game. It's a very popular game. But it's one of those games that and I'm not sure why, I just couldn't get into it. So thanks for the suggestion. But try harder. From the Make-A-Wish Foundation, coffee grinder strike on a Sunday morning. Yeah, I was saying before I started recording, I woke up and my coffee grinder was on the fritz, and that was first thing on a Sunday morning. That is not the kind of thing that you want to hear. I've got the spare backup coffee pod machine going, so I am not in a coffee-free zone. Otherwise, you wouldn't be getting an episode of this Q&A. But I'm going to need to do a spot of maintenance on the grinder. It's a great machine. I've got one of these bean-to-cup machines where you can put ground coffee in, but it's also got a receptacle for coffee beans, and it will grind them into the filter and make coffee straight from the beans as well. But it's the grinder part that keeps, going tits up. So that's a bit of a blow to morale. He also says, howdy Jingles, howdy cats, howdy chat. Juicy is sitting on the chair right next to me. She's very, very happy to be included here. This is her favourite spot, basically. She just likes to be near me all the time. So there's a chair next to where I sit that she likes to sleep on. She's there right now. No idea where Akazuki is. Is this recording? Yes, we are recording. The actual question, friends of his are on vacation in South Africa for the rest of the year. All right. They're staying in Kaapstad now to acclimate and plan to travel around later. Oh, that's right. Yeah, it's summer down there now, isn't it? Oh, I remember my first summer in South Africa. It nearly killed me. Coming from the northeast of England, where you get sun like 3 days a year, heading straight to South Africa and the summer there. Painful. Especially when you live on the escarpment, because most of South Africa is actually in very high above sea level. South Africa is basically this big flat mountain that slopes down to the shore around the coast. And it gets really hot there. I mean, obviously, as you can imagine, it's Africa. It gets hot, but South Africa in particular gets really hot during the summer. Are there any family-friendly activities or sites that I could recommend? The Kruger National Park's really, really good. You have to remember that when I lived in South Africa, we moved there in '82 when I was 12, and we left in '86 when I was 16. So I spent most of the time at school without, really going anywhere. And this was a long time ago. It's 30 years ago now. So my information isn't exactly up to date, but I do remember the Kruger National Park is a fantastic place to visit if you're into wildlife and the environment and stuff, and so on and so on. So yeah, that I would definitely recommend that. Also, any not too cheesy proposal site and general jewellery buying advice? Oh, you're going to be the best man. Yeah. Oh, and he even says, I feel you've been away from there too long to answer these, so I'll settle for a memory of a good place. Yeah, definitely the Kruger National Park is a fantastic place to visit. Loads of wildlife, loads of exotic scenery. Well, I say loads of exotic scenery, it's mostly grassland, but with the occasional mountain and lake. But yeah, definitely. So yeah, now as for proposal site and general jewellery buying advice, I'm pretty sure the Kruger National Park, if you're thinking of somewhere romantic to propose to your one true love, beautiful scenery in the Kruger National Park, that would definitely be, that kind of fits all of the questions that you're asking. That's an amazing place to go. It's an amazing place to visit, and probably, if you find the right spot, be an extremely romantic place for your friends to propose. So yeah, there you go, the Kruger National Park in South Africa. The Bearcat says, "G'day, mate. Favourite Pink Floyd and AC/DC songs. How did you know I like Pink Floyd and AC? Well, then again, I suppose I keep coming out with Pink Floyd quotes like "Careful with the Axe, Eugene," and my love of Akadaka is well documented. Favourite Pink Floyd and AC/DC songs. I'd have to go with, it's a tough one. Pink Floyd. I mean, "Shine On You Crazy Diamond" live is amazing. But I think my very favourite Pink Floyd song would be back in the Roger Waters era. Even though I kind of prefer Pink Floyd with Dave Gilmour after Roger Waters was kicked out of the band. But I think my very favourite Pink Floyd song, my apologies, by the way, to anybody who's listening who hates Pink Floyd or AC/DC, would be from the Final Cut album, which I think was the last album they did with Roger Waters. And that would be "The Gunner's Dream." And it's a song about the tail gunner on a Lancaster who was killed in action. In a corner of some foreign field, the gunner sleeps tonight. Great song, fantastic song, great album, not a single bad song on it. Favourite AC/DC song? Wow. Oh man, I couldn't pick just one. Yeah, you've got me there. I don't know. Back in Black. I think I'm probably going to have to go with Back in Black. Because obviously it was the song from the Back in Black album, which is the first album with Brian Johnson, who comes from where I live, by the way. In fact, I've met him. He performed. Short story for you here. The local man's working club in the village where I lived when I was a kid. In the village just down the road from us in Newburn, there was this scrapyard, and Brian Johnson, while he was performing in the band Geordie, before they had like recording contracts or anything, used to work at that scrapyard. He was a panel beater, used to work on cars, and then when he got the AC/DC gig, he still would drink in that area. He'd come back and after recording and touring, because he still lived locally, and I was working as what they called a pot lad. You couldn't do that now. I mean, I was so young at the time. Now you have to be a certain age to get a job working in a pub. But at the local working club, there was a live band on. I can't remember who they were. They were just they didn't have a recording contract or anything. And Brian Johnson came in for a drink, and he got recognised. So they had him up on stage, and they were playing AC/DC songs while I was collecting empty glasses, with Brian Johnson singing. So yeah, that was kind of amazing. But I'd probably have to go for Back in Black, because it's just an all-time classic, and from the first album with Brian Johnson on it after Bon Scott sadly died. Andy Tomo, any plans on looking out or playing the Callisto Protocol on PC? I have to admit, I've heard of it, but I haven't really looked at it, and I don't know an awful lot about it. Although I think because I sign up to all these websites where you can get promotional keys for games on Steam mostly, so that you can preview them. And I'm pretty sure I might have a Callisto Protocol key kicking around somewhere. So perhaps is the best I can say, but I don't really know anything about the game. I'd have to look more into it. Ooh. Gidzeki, there's a great question here. Good day, no Overlord. What is your opinion of the Rogue Trader computer RPG about to release on Alpha? Yes, from Owlcat Games. I've actually played some of their role-playing games. They are very hard and very, very good. And I am just going to need to check my emails here. So you're going to have to bear with me. Let me just have a quick look as to whether or not I'm about to break, some kind of NDA. I am not breaking an NDA if I tell you that I have access to Rogue Trader. It's a Warhammer 40,000 role-playing game in the vein of Baldur's Gate called Rogue Trader, and I am not breaking an NDA by telling you I do have access to it, but I can't actually talk about it or share any video about it until the 7th of December. So, yeah, soon. And, I can't even tell you whether I think it's good or not, but yes. Warhammer 40,000 Rogue Trader. It's been in development from Owlcat Games for quite some time. And the alpha is, I believe, coming out sometime. Well, there's an embargo on any information about it until the 7th of December, so very, very soon. And yes, I'm going to be playing it right after I've recorded this episode of Mingles, actually. So yes, I am very, very excited about that one. Unfortunately, I can't tell you anything about it until the 7th, so soon. Just be patient. Gosshawk says, good day to the Salt Mine Overlord. Hope you and the cat are doing good. Now to my question. While on board the ship, how did you spend your free time? When or if you had any free time? Taking notes for my future career as a seafarer in the merchant sector. Right. So I'm sure many of you are aware, I used to be in the Royal Navy, 22 years. I started out as a radio operator, and I wasn't very good at it, and it sucked. Because radio operators, as members of the Warfare Department, or as it was known back then, the Operations Department, were watchkeepers. So what that meant was generally when the ship was in cruising watches, when you were just normally at sea and nobody was trying to shoot anybody, you would be in what was called the 1 in 3 watchkeeping system. So the comms department, for example, would be split into 3 watches. And then one watch would be on watch in the communications office, another watch would be off watch doing whatever they wanted, and another watch would be not on watch in the communications office, but they would be turned to, i.e. working on the upper deck. So you were either on watch in the, manning the radios and stuff, or you were chipping, painting, and doing all kinds of busy work on the upper deck, maintenance and stuff, or you were in bed. So it's a hellish way to live, basically. It sucks. So in your free time at sea as a member of the Warfare Department, usually you're just asleep, because if you're not asleep, you're working, right? And it's bloody awful. Now, after my first 4 or 5 years, I thought, this is terrible, I hate it, and also I'm really bad at it. So I branch transferred to the supply department, where I became a writer, which is basically the ship's clerk. And it was a completely different world. For a start, you were what was known as a day worker. So you started at 8, you finished at 4. That was it. So you got to go to bed every night. And after 4 p.m., your time was your own. There were still certain jobs that had to be done, like there were evening rounds where the XO and the Master Arms would come around and inspect all of the mess decks and the communal areas, the toilets and the bathrooms, and they all had to be cleaned ready for evening rounds every night. So there's a lot of cleaning still going on. But as long as it's done, your time is yours. Most of the time, I had a computer. Whether that was just a laptop but the ideal thing about having the ship's office was you had your own compartment that you could set your own computer up, and you could play computer games undisturbed, because after 4 p.m. you'd shut the door, you've got your own little computer room. Fantastic. Or we'd watch videos down the mess deck, or whatever. There's not a massive amount to do. There's a tiny little gym stuck in the corner of some compartment where you can do a bit of fizz. You can go running around the upper deck, as long as the upper deck isn't out of bounds, which happens surprisingly often. Obviously, when it gets dark, nobody's allowed out on the upper deck without permission from the officer of the watch, because it's too easy to fall over the side, and nobody would know. When you're at flying stations, you're landing and recovering helicopters, the upper deck's out of bounds, at least after the funnel. So there's not a huge amount of stuff for you to do. And it's very easy to get overweight, because basically all you can do is eat, sleep, and watch TV. So, but you get a lot more time off in the supply branch than you ever did in the warfare branch. So depending on what job you're doing in the Merchant Marine, your experience may vary. But thanks for the question. It's a good one. Next question from Neo Primal. G'day from Australia, Jingles. My question, how was the transition from Navy to civilian life? Multiple members of my family have transitioned out of military service and they found it difficult. How did it go for you? Also, going to cheat here and ask a second question. Up to you if you want to respond. Regardless, have you given Elite Dangerous another go? Yeah. The Thargoids have broken out into all-out war with humanity. It's an in-game event the likes we have never seen before, and it's only set to get worse from here. Everyone can participate. However, it isn't exclusively human Thargoid combat, and the Empire is under attack. Bollocks. Right, anyway, so your first question. I found the transition really, really easy, because my last job in the Navy was working at the Admiralty Interview Board at HMS Sultan, which is here in Gosport. It was a day working job. You got to go home every night, unless you were on duty, where you had to stay at the AIB and look after the potential officer candidates. But most of the time, you got to go home every night. It was a 9 to 5 job. Well, it wasn't. It was more a 7 to 4 job. Yeah, we started kind of early, but it was easy, and I got to go. I mean, I lived like 4 minutes away, so I could walk to and from work in less time than most people would drive to and from work. So the transition was really easy for me. Plus, I wasn't actually doing my professional job. I wasn't doing the writer job. It was mostly organising practical leadership tests for the potential officer candidates, demonstrating correct use of gymnasium equipment to them, and then basically setting all the gear up for them to try to figure out the practical problems we were giving them. So that was great. I was basically a civilian for my last 2 years anyway, so I had no problems with the transition. And the second question, Elite Dangerous. Yeah, I haven't given it another go. I mean, a couple of weeks back, Grumps, who is the organiser of the Salt Mines Discord server and who set up this Q&A for us every month, he has a fleet carrier, and he took it out to some system a couple of thousand light years above the galactic plane, and the view from there of looking down onto the galaxy was amazing. So I'm not sure I ever thanked him for that. Grumps, thank you very much.
I've basically kidnapped you.
Yeah, he has, yes. I'm still stuck there. So I'm well away from this whole Stargoid thing that's going on, but I have been following Obsidian Ant's videos. And if you play Elite Dangerous, you've probably heard of Obsidian Ant. And I remember, because it's update 14, where because they did something that was supposed to wipe out the Thargoids, and it went horribly, horribly wrong, and it just pissed the Thargoids off instead. And now the Thargoid motherships are closing in on the bubble. And in update 14, they've arrived, and all the shit kicks off. And I've been following Obsidian Ant's videos on it, thinking, should I, maybe? And he's been getting more and more and more excited. And then just a couple of days ago, I saw his latest video. Now that update 14 is out, and the Stargoids are here, and the video's just called, Is That It? And so it sounds a bit kind of underwhelming. Because I was getting, should I have a go? Yeah, I mean, I have to get back to the bubble, and I've been kidnapped by Grumps, but, I'm sure that wouldn't be a problem if I asked him very, very nicely. But then, it all just sounds like what was supposed to be a massive, galaxy-changing event is all a bit of a damp squib. So, yeah, no. Next question from Daddy in the East. Greetings, Jingles. Are you recording? I am. Are you watching the latest Gundam series, Witch from Mercury? Nope. I know I have this kind of reputation as being a massive weeb, but I'm really not. I mean, I've heard of Gundam, but I don't think I've ever seen a Gundam TV show. I've never seen a Gundam movie. I loved my Girls and Panzer, and I watched a lot of the classic anime stuff in the 80s when the manga company started importing and dubbing anime on VHS tapes into the UK. So Akira, obviously, classics like Venus Wars, Tank Police, Legend of the Overfiend. I've watched the Ghost in the Shell series, but much longer, 20 years later, like relatively recently. And I don't really watch an awful lot of it. I mean, I loved Girls and Panzer because tanks, and also because there's none of that fan service that you tend to get in a lot of anime. I mean, after watching Girls and Panzer, people said, "Oh, you got to watch Strike Witch, it's like Girls and Panzer but with aircraft." I was like, "Oh, sounds great. I'll give it a go." Within the first 30 seconds, there were panty shots. I was like, I can see where this is going. And she looks like she's about 14. So yeah, no. So no, I haven't watched, and I appreciate there's probably none of that in the Gundam series, but I haven't watched them. Sorry. Uraste wants to know, hello, Mr. Jingles. Since the passing of Boo, have you considered getting another dog? I myself have 2 golden retrievers, and they're a handful, if I may say, but I love them more than any other human I know. Anyway, cheers from the land of vampires. So I'm guessing you're from Romania? No, I haven't considered getting another dog. Boo was one of a kind. And plus, I have 2 cats as well, so it's not like I'm missing a pet. Well, technically there are 3 because Rita lives here now with her cat, Crystalline. Although Crystalline normally keeps herself to herself. But don't get me wrong, I love dogs. I mean, obviously I love dogs. But they're a lot more work to take care of than cats. I mean, even Boo, as small as he was, he had to be walked at least once a day. And that's a lot. It's not a lot of work. If you love them, you'll do it because you love them. But cats don't need to be walked. My 2 girls are indoor cats, so the only taking care of is making sure I feed them every day, brushing them every day, which is fun. I enjoy doing that. Juicy in particular loves getting brushed. She sounds like a 2-stroke engine going when you get the old Furminator out and start brushing her back. She loves it. Absolutely tolerates it. It's more difficult to brush, although sometimes she's just in the mood for it. She just wants to be brushed. But that's basically it. Feed them, brush them, and then play with them. And they're easy. And I mean, Boo's irreplaceable. He was such a good little dog. You're not going to make me cry, you Rusty. Okay? I do miss him. He was a great little dog. Anyway. But thank you for the question. Moving on to Volker 802. Couple of questions for Jingles. First, would you rather put pineapple on pizza or pasta on pizza? Those are my only 2 choices. What kind of monster are you? Pineapple on pizza. Yeah. I mean, the idea of putting pasta on a pizza, I think, is probably worse. Because pineapple at least tastes of something. The problem being that it tastes of pineapple. But if you put a gun to my head and said choose, I'd probably say pineapple, because it does at least taste of something. Second, in all of your adventures, which navy do you have the worst experience with? And lastly, have you tried the game Nebulous Fleet Command? Okay, I can answer that last one very easily. Nope, in fact, I've never even heard of it. So sorry. Which navy did you have the worst experience with? That's a good one, because I didn't really have any bad experiences with most other navies. I mean, there was that time when the captain of the German frigate, who was the captain of our task force, got really, really pissed off with us. But that was kind of our fault. More than, it wasn't the fault of the German Navy. We were in, where was it? Toulon, French naval base. And we had night leave. And I'm pretty sure I've told this story before. Some members of the ship's company got a little bit of the worse for wear on drink, and then they came back and went down to the paint store and got a tin of pink paint, which I believe was undercoat for something technical, and they threw it all over the bows of this German frigate, and then went to bed laughing their asses off. But they weren't laughing their asses off the next morning when the captain of this German frigate, who was the guy in charge of our task force, our boss, or our captain's boss, saw it. Obviously, one of us had done it. And then all of our leave got cancelled until somebody confessed. So that was a kind of a bad experience with the German Navy, but it wasn't their fault. It was us. I think, I mean, I don't want to cop out in the question here. I mean, it's not that, I'm afraid of, slagging off one particular country or anything, but I never really had any bad experiences with other navies, and we did operate with other navies quite a lot. When we're doing training in Portland, other navies would send their ships to us for us to train them up. So we had a lot of experience in working with other navies. The Dutch, there was some fairly funny experiences working with the Dutch, because the Dutch are great. We need to get this out there right now. The Dutch are great, but they have a very sort of relaxed attitude to certain things that other Western nations are very uptight about. So we do this thing called a cross-poll, where we would take some of our ship's company and put them on the Dutch ship, or the cloggies, as we called them, and then some of the cloggies would come on board our ships. And I don't know what it was like for them, but it was one hell of a culture shock for our guys, because the Royal Navy only started putting women on board ships in 1990 or 91. I was on HMS Brazen in the first Gulf War, and we were not the first ship to get women on board. I think we were the second. I can't remember the name of the first one, but it came out and relieved us because we were out there in the Gulf, and the war was fought and then done, and then we were waiting for our relief to turn up, and whichever, I think it was HMS Broadsword or Battle Axe, I can't remember, but whichever frigate relieved us, and then we went back. We all had leave, and then when we came back from leave, we had our first women on board, the Wrens, Women's Royal Naval Service, as they were at the time. Now they're all just Royal Navy. And they have their own separate mess deck. And they have their own separate... It was a hell of a real pain in the arse, because there's not a huge amount of bathrooms on board for junior ratings anyway. And then the few bathrooms that we had walls put up and split into male and female bathrooms. So it was, pain in the arse. But you had to have a separate bathroom for the women and separate sleeping quarters for the women. Not so in the Dutch Navy. They don't give a shit about any of that. The men and the women all have the same. They all sleep in the same mess decks. They all work together. They all socialise together. They live together. They have the same bathrooms. So our guys going on board these Dutch ships were like, there's naked women everywhere. It's like, oh my God, I thought this would be great, but it's freaking me the hell out. So there was that. But I wouldn't say that was a bad experience. I suppose the only really bad experience I had when I was working with other navies was I can't remember exactly when it was. I know I was on HMS. I've still been on HMS Brazen, so kind of early on. We're doing a joint exercise, a NATO exercise in what's it called? Not the Balkans. That's down, Croatia, former Yugoslavia, the Baltic. Yes, we're up in the Baltic. So we're doing these exercises with the Germans, the Dutch, the Danes, the Norwegians, and so on and so on. These Navy exercises. And the exercises, because we had planned the exercise, the British, and then there was this meeting before the exercise where the captains and XOs of all the ships would get together, and they'd brief each other and so on, and then they'd all go back to their ships, and then we'd sail and on with the exercises. So because we'd planned the exercise, we were going to do this on the Wednesday, we're going to do that on the Thursday, we'd have a mock war on the Friday, then on the Saturday there'd be some blah, 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 whatever, and on the Sunday, blah, 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 this. And on the Saturday, we turned up at the exercise area. We're the only ones there. We were like, what's going on? What happened? Where's everybody else? Communications office, because I was still a radio operator at the time. Did we miss a signal? Has the exercise been called off? No, the exercise had not been called off. But everybody else went home for the weekend. Because they don't do weekends in the other NATO navies, certainly not the European ones. So we were out there on our own. And like a bunch of fucking idiots, we carried on with the exercise. We just simulated the other ships on the computer. They fed, simulated contacts into the radar and so on and so on. And we just exercised with ourselves rather than taking the hint and going somewhere for the weekend. Well, you can't just go somewhere for the weekend in a warship. You need to get diplomatic clearance to visit, a foreign port and so on and so on. So, yeah, thanks, Europe. Great job. None of them bothered telling us. They're just like, yeah, we're not going to do that. They all went home. Oh, yeah, so that was a good one. Yeah, well, that's probably, and again, that's more like our own fault, but that's probably the worst experience I ever had with another Navy. Anyway, from Hack Wild, what's your favourite firearm? And then he lists a whole bunch of weapons. I've heard of one, the AKS-74N, but the QBJ-191 or the QBJ-192 I've never heard of. My favourite firearm. You have to remember, of course, that I've probably got more experience of handling firearms than most British people because I was in the military. So I trained on the Sterling submachine gun, the SLR, the old FN FAL, known as the SLR, the self-loading rifle, the SA-80, and then the Browning high-power sidearm. But that's still, nothing compared to the average Texan. Favourite firearm? I am kind of fond of the Browning high power. It's a 9mm. I know firearm purists are going to scream in horror when they hear me say this, but it was designed by John Moses Browning, although it was completed after he died. And it's basically sort of kind of a 9mm version of the Colt 1911. And the 1911 is a great weapon. And I would probably have to say the Browning high power because it's just a reliable pistol. It works when you need it to. And it's in a, fairly ubiquitous and effective caliber, 9mm. Jingles, when is your charity Christmas album coming out? You can sing, right? Well, whether or not I can sing, I think I think I can. Other people might disagree. But it's funny that you should ask, when is your charity Christmas album coming out? Because some of the spam that I keep getting, like on a weekly basis, let me just have a quick look and see if there's any in there right now. Apparently Coral Studios, who are now based in Estonia, keep offering me advertising offers, as do the Canon Corporation. Let's have a quick look. Nice to meet you. I am a Canon Corporate Public Relations Manager. Really? With a Czech Republic email address. Fancy that. But yeah, I keep getting offers to perform at digital music events. So we saw your channel. We think you'd be great. Really? You've seen my channel and you think that makes me ideal to perform at your digital music event. I suspect that there's probably a deposit that I have to pay in order to secure my place at these events. But these kind of things keep coming up. It's amazing the amount of spam I get. I was watching something on YouTube the other day where they said, what does 90% of the internet consist of? And of course, everybody thinks it's porn. But apparently porn only accounts, because studies have been done, porn only accounts for less than 1% of the internet, which is, I'm sure, is kind of surprising to everybody. But 89% of all emails are spam. And looking at my business email folder, I can believe that. What were we talking about? Me singing. Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, despite the fact that I keep getting invited to join digital music festivals, no plans. Immaculado says, Grandpa Jingles, who was your favourite musician to listen to in your Navy days? And were you guys allowed to listen to music on the job? Does music play on the ship speakers? Yes, yeah. They have a... one of the chief weapon engineers would be in charge of the ship's radio, which was exactly what you said. He would stick a tape in, or a selection of tapes, and we had a system where they would just play these tapes. And you didn't get a choice over what the music was, but if you wanted to, you could turn it on and listen to that. But most places nobody's listening to music in the ops room, for example. They've got a slightly more important job to do in there. But yeah, most places would have a radio, and or some kind of cassette player where you could listen to music, providing it wasn't going to interfere with your work. Basically, every office and workplace on board would be playing music during the day. And I can remember one deployment in particular. What ship was I on? I can't remember. Some Type 42 destroyer. And we had 2 or possibly 3, because time had moved on. It wasn't cassette tapes anymore. We had CD players now. And we had like 2 or maybe 3 CDs for an entire 6-month deployment. And one of them was a Star Sailor album. And I cannot remember the name of the album, but I can remember every song on that album, word for word. So our leading writer was a big Star Sailor fan, and he had 1 CD, and that was that. And then the other writer, because I didn't have any music, and the other writer had Celine Dion Falling Into You album. Right, so that was it. That's what we listened to in the ship's office for 6 months. Celine Dion and Star Sailor. And it got really annoying at first. And I know you're thinking, well, why didn't you're on deployment? We were in the Mediterranean for this deployment, so it wasn't like we couldn't buy any music. At least once every 2 weeks we'd stop and visit somewhere, and they have music in the Mediterranean as well. So, but it was kind of really annoying at first because you're listening to the same 2 CDs for months on end. But then after a while, it was really weird. It was like we got brainwashed and we just didn't want to listen to anything else. So if you listen to enough bad music for long enough, actually, that's not fair. I mean, Celine Dion does have a fantastic voice. Oh, God. You see? Stockholm Syndrome. That's what this is. Celine Dion kept me at ransom for so long. I'm actually defending her. She does have a great voice. Even if you don't like her music, you have to, I'm stopped. Stockholm Syndrome, that's what this is. But yeah, you could listen to whatever you like, but that one particular deployment, we only had the 2 CDs to listen to, and we'd listened to them for so long that we didn't want to listen to anything else by the end of it. Required extensive deprogramming when we got back from that deployment. Jingles, are there any historic events you wish you could have witnessed firsthand? This question from Morningstar. Oof. Most of them, I should imagine, although first-hand, maybe from a safe distance. I don't know. Let's turn this one over to you guys. Let's see in the comments when this one goes up as the episode of Mingles with Jingles on Monday. Because, there's all sorts of things I would love to have seen firsthand. I'd like to have seen Krakatoa going off from a safe distance. There's all kinds of things I would love to have seen from a safe distance. The kind of things that you need to be seen up close and personal. Actually, I read a short story many, many years ago. I can't even remember who wrote it, where this was the exact thing. And it was all to do with package holidays from the future going to witness, historic events in the past. And obviously you couldn't break the timeline. So you had to be dressed appropriately before you could be sent back with your tour guide, making sure that you didn't do anything wrong, and you had to play along with whatever was happening. And unsurprisingly, one of the most popular historical time travel tours was the crucifixion. So you had all these people dressing up as people from, what were they, the Nazarenes, or the people from Judea. Period appropriate, all taking language tapes. This was a really, really old, written in the 60s, the idea of direct inputting language learning into people's brains in the way that they do in like Battlefield Earth. But they would be taught to speak, Hebrew. They would be dressed appropriately, and it was drilled into them. No matter what happens, you have to play along with what everybody else is doing, right? You can't change the way things happened in the past. So they're all there at the point where Jesus is being dragged out and Pontius Pilate is saying, which of these 3 criminals should I spare? And a couple of people shout, Jesus, Jesus. But then everybody else has been told, no, you have to, Barnabas or whatever his name was, the one who was, the murderer who was spared, and then Jesus ended up being crucified. So everybody, because they were all tourists, they all start shouting, Barnabas, release Barnabas, and so on and so on. And then it gradually dawns on people as they're shouting that everybody shouting release Barnabas is a tourist. And the only people shouting release Jesus are the Jews who were actually born there. So if it wasn't for the people going back in time, Jesus wouldn't have been crucified, was the point that this story was making. So I don't know how we got onto this. Oh, yeah, any historic events you wish you could have witnessed firsthand. But it reminded me of that short story. I think we're probably closing in on the end here. We're coming up to 45 minutes. So, final question, possibly, from Dr. Ghost Games. Howdy, Jingles. I was wondering if you'd ever make a return to World of Warships Legends, the console version of World of Warships, and maybe even make another video on it. It has been updated a lot, and I'd like to hear what you think about the changes. Much love from Michigan, USA, across the pond. When I was in South Africa at boarding school, we had an exchange student from Michigan. It's the only reason I know that Michigan exists. His name was Paul Kundinger. He's a cool kid. Anyway, World of Warships Legends. How can I put this? This is a question I get asked a lot. I also get asked if I can feature replays from World of Warships Legend. And, well, I wouldn't have the faintest idea how to make a replay from the console version work. And I no longer have a console. Well, technically I do, but it's in storage. My PS4 Pro, which I used to use for playing stuff like Red Dead Redemption when it first came out, but then that came out on the PC, so I didn't need it for that anymore. And then I would use it as a media player, so I could play Blu-rays on it, and I could access Netflix and Amazon Prime and so on it. But now I've got a brand new smart TV, and it does all of that for me. And I realised that the only thing the PlayStation was doing was drawing power. And that shit is expensive these days. So I have disconnected it, and it's in storage. So I know, for that reason, I have no plans to go back to World of Warships Legends. I realised I did a video on it years back when it was still in development, and when it still looked, promising, because they wanted everybody to like it. So they included the bare minimum of monetization and overpowered premiums, which is, the way most developers, when they're doing a game as a service, that's the way they tend to start off. Unless you're Activision, Blizzard, or Electronic Arts, or Ubisoft, and you just don't give a shit, and you put them aggressive monetization into your full price games right from the start. But when you're doing a free-to-play game, you need to get the audience, you need to get the bums on seats before you start monetizing. So I think I covered the Commander update, where I liked what they were doing with the Commanders, but there's no chance I'm ever going to go back to it because I just don't have a games console anymore. So sorry to disappoint, but that's just the way it is, unfortunately. We will answer one final question here from Saki. Good morning, Jingles, because I've just seen it and it is a good one. Since you have prior experience, I wanted to ask you any tips for being deployed to active combat. I'm being deployed for the first time in a few days, and I wanted to know if there's any tips I can get from you. Maybe noteworthy, that may be different since I'm in the army. Yeah, it'll be very, very different. That's the reason why I joined the Navy and not the army, because I get to sleep in a bed every night. I don't have to sleep in a ditch, and I get hot food 3 times a day. So, any general tips? That's a really, really good question. First time in a few days to an active combat zone in the army. Try not to be a hero. Do your job. Do the job that you're being sent out there to do, but try not to be a hero, because a sucking chest wound is nature's way of telling you to chill the fuck out. Okay? And I could organise a flutter valve, keep you alive until they get you to an aid station, but it's generally better if that isn't required. So do your job, but don't do anything stupid. That's all I'm going to say. And I think, given that our military experiences are going to be vastly different, I think that's all I'm probably really qualified to say. But best of luck to you, and thanks for the question. And on that literal bombshell, I think that's going to be it for this Q&A session. We're coming up to 50 minutes. There's been some great questions. Thank you, everybody. Let me just switch back to the relevant channel. How many of you are here? 83. Not a bad turnout. And for those of you who are watching this as Monday's episode of Mingles with Jingles, because you couldn't make it, because we do hold this at a really, really awkward time for anybody. Well, it's an awkward time. 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning. It's an awkward time for anybody who is British. But it's probably a really awkward time for anybody anywhere else in the world, like old Grumps, who's organising this whole thing. Grumps, what time is it where you are?
12:50 a.m.
Yeah, it's still the morning. It's just tomorrow morning, right? down in Middle Earth where Grumps lives. So thank you everybody who turned up. For those of you who couldn't make it, then I hope you've enjoyed listening to this as Monday's episode of Mingles with Jingles. And as always, take care, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.